Hey you guys, this is Tony Lucchini from Lucchini Trujillo Structural Engineers. Tony, take it away.
Okay, so I have walked the premises, the perimeter, the interior, gone over the list of questions that you had for Ben and myself, and just to start, in general, looks really good. Didn't find items that are typical for older adobe that we would be concerned with. You know, large cracks, etc., etc. Adobe is pretty susceptible to moisture, so being that I didn't find any of that, it appears that the home has been kept and maintained really well over the years. The structure is obviously exposed framing in really all of the house. Things that I look for are excessive deflection, cracks in the beams. A wolf came in. And I didn't find any of that, so it looks really good. I think what we'll do is walk over to some items that I just wanted to point out, not necessarily having signs of structural failure, but just items that I felt I should point out.
Have a few little.
We're gonna put the dogs in the video. Look at this dog. This is a mighty creature. Wow. That's a lot of dog right there.
They're great dogs.
So I don't know if you want to go actually down in there or just want me to kind of.
Yeah,
really...
let's go in there because nothing like visual.
Okay.
You can click on the lights.
Get the light for you.
Okay.
There we go. So we're almost out of here. We're waiting on
Okay, so the joists down here look pretty good too. You know, like I was saying, same thing for the exposed framing upstairs. I look for any stress cracks usually in the middle of the joists, or just looking at them, see if I see any permanent deflection, which means that one, they were undersized, and two, over the years they've experienced some creep, which means that it's permanent deflection.
Creep as in that creepy guy, creep?
Creep as in...
I mean, that's the word, creep?
Creep.
Okay.
But not creepy guy, but
it.
creeping fibers in the wood.
Yeah.
So as it deflects, it kind of does that. After a long period, they stay that way and they don't rebound elastically anymore. I don't see any of that. What I do want to point out though is the ledger is minimally connected, I would say. So for example, in this span here, we have a pretty small 3/8 inch, probably an expansion anchor, I would say. Here and at the far other corner, and in between, we have a little spike here that they drove into the concrete, but that's about it. And
that looks like one of those really beefy framing base nail kind of thing.
Sometimes they'll use those to pin down the plates before they get them epoxied. And it's pretty similar condition on all the ends.
And guys, I want to interject here. This boiler system that we couldn't see because it was dark is abandoned. This is the system that was abandoned in lieu of the 2 new HVAC units on top. And I just wanted to include this briefly because we haven't looked at it yet, and there it is. It's an antique. It is abandoned. Okay, thank you.
So what I would suggest is that I did a little bit of number crunching, and what personally what I would like to see, being that your ledger is just a 2x, meaning it's 1.5 inches wide, is if this was being designed new, we'd be looking at probably a 1/2 inch anchor at every 12 inches on center. So this is very minimally attached. Surprised that you haven't had any problems, but and there really is no sign. So whatever the loading here in this room has probably been kept relatively light over the years. But I would recommend that you either use a 1/2 inch expansion anchor or a 1/2 inch threaded rod that could be epoxied into the wall, which is kind of like a glue, if you will. And do that, like I said, might as well do it at 12 inches on center if you're going to put the effort in. That's kind of where the numbers would put it. But other than that, like I said, it doesn't. There's a little bit of deflection in that ledger, but it's held up really well. Honestly, there's no signs of failures. So just pointing it out.
And guys, one more technical thing that we weren't able to look at is the well. This is the domestic well for the house. You see the pump right there. This is the pressure tank. And I actually see that there was some very recent and fresh solder happening. This is solder splatter, and all this copper looks pretty fresh. Anyway, this is all part of the report that will come from the well guys. But we never got a good look at this, so here it is. You've got a water softening, conditioning type of system here. This is a filter unit right here. And it all looks pretty straightforward and clean. Not sketchy, not bad. Okay, thank you. All right, so we're done in here?
We are, yeah.
Okay, let me...
Okay, let's go first.
All right.
All right. I guess let's run upstairs.
Hi, baby. Hi, baby. Such a pretty dog. I'm like pretty much blown away. Okay.
All right. So addressing one of the questions, can you put a roof deck? No is the simple answer. I did measurement. I measured the size of the beams and run some numbers on this. Not really, not even close. It's sized appropriately for a roof load. Probably in the range of 20 to 30 pounds per square foot of live load, which is, it's hard to talk in the math so much, but that's about half of where we need to be by current code standards, which is what we would have to meet to technically allow occupancy of the roof as a deck. So no on that. You'll notice too that these beams are about 6 inches deep. The ones that support the actual second floor are about 7.5. So that just tells you that these really weren't intended to support.
And just a learning question, Tony. When you say
Sure.
6 inches deep, what dimension are you referring to specifically?
Yeah. So this the depth here. So this here.
Okay.
6 inches. They're about 3 3/4 inches wide.
Okay.
So they're rough sawn 4x6. They're at 30 inches on center. Both this bedroom and that bedroom are between 12 and 13 feet in span length. So I use that number, and 60 pounds per square foot, which is code minimum for live load. And we were way over, probably about 200% over on stress. If I back that down to 40 PSF, which is what the interior floor loading would be, we're still probably around, at 140% over stress, where 100% should be the max.
And is that saying that would be the case if you were to load it up with a deck?
It would be the case if you were to load it up with a deck, which you'd be increasing the dead load, which means the weight of the roof, because you're going to want to put something, rippers and some type of material over your roof surface. So that eats into it. And then 60 pounds per square foot is pretty high, but that's the code required live loading. That's probably the case where you have quite a few people up there on a party Friday night. And I mean, if there's just a couple people up there, the regular roof load would definitely support you. But that's just kind of off the record, if you will, because the code really doesn't make exceptions for that to be officially occupied as a deck.
Good question. Good answer. So what is that plate over there? Do you have any idea what that is?
I don't. There's a hook on the exterior, but it's actually here.
Oh, you know what? Maybe that's the anchor for the mast. Because you see the electrical mast, the wires heading right into
Oh,
the
yeah.
wall.
Yeah, you're right.
Let's take a look at that when we get back out
Yeah,
there. I think that's just the anchor for the mast.
Yeah, that's funny though, because there is an eye bolt, and I thought it was on this corner outside.
All right.
So they must have, maybe they moved it at some point.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I looked at it, like an old penny from like 1961. And like an old soda bottle from the 60s.
Dog made it out. Hi.
Hey, you're Ben?
I'm Ben.
Okay, sorry.
Very nice
I'm
to
on
meet
your
you.
video.
No,
sorry.
you're not in the video.
All right.
Promise.
Okay. And,
So just to kind of cover bases out here, another thing that's pretty typical is rotting of Portal column bases.
Yes.
You don't have that here because it actually used a 1-inch standoff. So that's great. It was built properly.
Our dry rot guy found one upright, I think in the casita patio that had some dry rot.
Okay.
But
there-
overall, it is in really great
there's
shape.
a little bit of dry rot happening on the sheathing in the garage.
Okay.
But it's at the very base, and doesn't affect the studs or the sill plate, which is pressure treated. So just keep that in mind.
All right.
So we're in the casita. So I guess there is a little bit of dry rot too on the overhang. It's just the overhang, but there's a little bit of moisture coming in around the flashing.
Okay.
It does not appear to be working back all the way in, so I would call that real cosmetic, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
In here, if you a good example of creep are these vigas. You'll notice there is some permanent curvature to them. It's very typical of older vigas. Traditionally, they are undersized because when they were constructed, there really wasn't an engineer doing the calculations. There's no sign of failure on these, no flexure cracks in the middle, so they've just at times had some excessive deflection, and that has become somewhat permanent. But again, that creep does not, to the best of our knowledge on a science basis, does not affect the strength. It's kind of an unknown still, believe it or not.
Huh. So what you're saying is that the engineering community at large has identified that creep happens, but the beam is still as strong.
Correct.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah. So I guess to some extent it makes sense that the fibers have slipped, but they have not detached from each other.
Sure.
So it's, you see that there, and you kind of see evidence of it over here as well. They've covered up the vigas here, I believe, that are likely inside the ceiling. You can see it over the window. But again, you'd be lucky to find an older adobe viga structure that doesn't have signs of that creep permanent deflection in place. Question about the unevenness of the floor in here. I don't think it has anything to do with the cottonwood trees. I believe that if the roots were going to kind of make their way under here and kind of push on the floor, you typically, when a root is impacting the floor of the structure, it's extremely localized. You'll see, an actual point of upward heave where the root is actually surfacing, and this is kind of just a general waviness to the floor. One, and then two, the perimeter walls really don't seem to have been in contact with any roots as well. I didn't see any evidence of major settlement or upward push, heave of the roots. So my guess is that this brick was just laid down on the original likely dirt floor, and this was just the levelness that they achieved.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I don't see any signs of like moisture working its way up. So obviously I didn't pull the carpet up, but from what is visible, there's no sign of moisture, which would be another catalyst that could cause some type of floor movement. So like I said, probably the original levelness of the floor is what you're seeing here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. In the past, when you've seen houses that are being affected by tree roots,
Mm-hmm.
what's the most common initial indicator?
Like I said, it's usually a very localized upward upheaval of a certain area in the floor.
Not necessarily stem walls cracking or things of that nature.
Stem walls cracking, you could see that, but again, like I said, it's usually a pretty significant amount of movement,
Mm-hmm.
more so than you would even see from settlement, because you actually have something that is filling a void and can grow rather large. So you'll see, for example, you got a really fine hairline crack here, but that crack would probably be more so on the range of about, at least a 1/4 inch. So it wouldn't be subtle, I guess I would say that.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So when a tree starts eating the building, you know it is
Right.
pretty
And-
common.
Yeah, and a good example is, I guess depending on where you grew up, but where I grew up, we had mulberries, and those roots were known to be pretty invasive. When a root surfaced, it would completely push a sidewalk or your driveway up. It would lift off the ground.
There's some of that in town.
Yeah, yeah. So like I said, pretty obvious. Yeah.
All right.
Not a whole lot to say about the garage. There's a little bit of moisture at the base that you can see that works its way up.
You're talking about that staining?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It's not going to affect the studs or the plate, which is pressure treated. It's just going to have a kind of a slow rot of the bottom of the sheathing. It probably needs, or probably should have had flashing at the base, which isn't in place. Would be hard to put in now without tearing it off. So just something to point out.
Is the material below grade?
It is not,
Oh, okay, good.
except for the back.
So it's basically just seeping in on the bottom edge.
Yeah, probably from rain hitting the wall, works its way down and just wraps around.
All right.
Yeah. Usually you'd have a little bit of a flash edge there that's not in place. On the back though, we do have a little bit of soil up against the wood framing. I would definitely suggest pulling this off because that's going to increase the rate of rot back here.
Okay.
Other than that, really nothing else.
Let's go walk to the
Notable.
back of that house. I want to just look
okay.
at the anchor point. And Tony, just when you let your eyes fall across this structure,
Mhm.
in a general sense, do you see anything that is a concern?
I really don't. Adobe is a very brittle material and doesn't shy away from exposing any imperfections. And it looks good. I don't think the stucco was redone in the past month or so.
Right.
So if there was active movement, it would have already retelegraphed to the surface,
Mhm.
and that really isn't happening. It's very clean.
I think our plate up there is the anchor for
Yeah.
the mast.
Right. And there's that other eye bolt on this side. I
Yes.
guess it's lower on the floor level, but
You know, I'm gonna submit a theory, which is that this is where the old electric box was, and it was secured up there. And then when they put in the new stuff, this is all much more recent, that they ran it over, and that's our new mast.
yeah, and
That-
new eye bolt.
And a new eye bolt.
Yeah.
Well, if there's nothing else you feel compelled to talk about,
Okay. Yeah. There's really not. It looks good. Honestly.
in a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most perfect structure you've ever seen, 1 being it needs to be raised, where is this thing?
I would probably put it at an 8, only because, like I said, of the age, some of the roof members wouldn't meet current code design loads,
Mhm.
but they show no signs of failure.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, it looks good.
Do you-
There's
do
really
you-
no signs of anything.
Do you think this house is going to collapse in the next decade?
Oh, the next 100 years, huh?
No, decade.
Oh, 10 years, century. No, absolutely not.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
yeah,
right.
yeah. Unless some freak of nature storm comes through.
Right. Crazy flooding. The Rio Grande decides to
to
flood the banks.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That brings up a good point. The basement
Uh-huh.
concrete looks good.
Okay.
It's not cracked. No signs of lateral movement, which just since you brought that up, I have seen evidence of older structures start to push inward because we have 100, 200-year rain events, and it's clean. There's no sign of any bad history.
Did you see any efflorescence down there at all?
I did not. Yeah.
All right. Well, okay then. We'll call you if we have any questions.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.